Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to the team at Levitt for having us back at their annual event, and thank you all for taking the time out to join us to talk everything that is backup, and following on so eloquently from sort of Paul teeing up the conversation around why backup's so important, despite the fact that our data and our applications are now in the cloud, and the cloud is this, as Rocky Balboa said in one of the latest Creed movies, this mythical unicorn in the sky, looking up how can our data be in the cloud, and the misconception that the cloud is anything but someone else's computer, and subsequently is still susceptible to all of the risks, threats, and actually even more so now than ever before, that what used to be in the office or in the server room was susceptible to. So is your data protected, and do you understand the needs around cloud data and the threats that's facing sort of cloud application data, be that Google, be that Microsoft? And it's no longer an option, the adoption of these platforms. Since 2008 and Microsoft sort of scrapping small business server that once was, everybody's sort of been driven towards this cloud application service adoption. And these organizations are now sort of releasing new initiatives and new updates to these applications that maintain people having to use them, with data being in specific formats, specific file types, that mean, if you want to converse, communicate, or trade, do business, teach, whatever it might be, with anybody else around the world, you have to do it on one of these platforms. And the adoption of these platforms is growing exponentially. If you click to the next slide, please, Boris. If you look at the impact of the pandemic and everybody suddenly working from disparate locations and having to collaborate and share documentation and work on centralized sort of pieces of resource, the adoption for SaaS-based applications in the UK specifically has gone up sort of triple digits. In other parts of Europe, it's significantly more than that. And what that then means is the threats have gone up as well, unfortunately, because these cybercrime institutions and organizations that once were targeting Windows servers on-prem sitting in someone's office are now thinking, well, hang on, people are moving away from that. So am I not going to be best bet engineering sort of technology and these sort of malicious types of applications to start targeting where the biggest bang for my buck is? Where is everybody now sitting? Well, they're sitting in Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure. So when you start breaking down some of the statistics, 1 in 3 organizations have lost data from cloud applications. On to the next one. 13% of data has been lost off the back of some sort of malicious attack. And you see it across the news, these types of malicious attacks, things like ransom cloud and these dark and ominous naming conventions for these types of malicious malware and ransomware deployments. And that 13%, that broken down component of that piece of pie is growing exponentially. And then on top of that, unfortunately, the reality is that individuals within our own institutions, organizations, are responsible as well for loss of data. So 7% of data lost through malicious deletions. And if you go forward one more, people being people, unfortunately, we're not getting any brighter. Accidents happen, we make mistakes, and the vast majority of the partners that certainly we at Datto work with say that the majority of their service tickets are logged because I had this, it was definitely there, and I can't find it anymore. Can you get it back? If you haven't got a backup, unfortunately, in the most part, you can't. So when we start looking at more specifically the sort of cybercrime component of this, as I said before, these threats are increasing exponentially. Now, obviously, 49% from Microsoft 365 and 22% from the newly named sort of Google Workspace. Obviously, that is up every single year. Obviously, Microsoft massively more prevalent in the UK at the moment. We at Datto use Google. We absolutely love Google. I'm a massive Google fan. But the cybercrime is sort of undiscriminative when it comes to which applications they're targeting. If your data's in the cloud, it is as susceptible now to data that was once on spinning disks in the office. So sort of reverting back to what Paul sort of put very, very eloquently earlier, if you skip forward to the next slide, unfortunately, the providers of these applications or these hosted application services are not responsible for your data. This concept of the cloud being the be-all and end-all mythical unicorn in the sky that is going to protect everything that I know, love, and hold dear to me is just not true. And these providers absolutely have a legal and moral and ethical and whatever you want to call it obligation to maintain the uptime of the infrastructure, the physical boxes that run these processes, these applications, these services, ensuring that they're putting measures in place to mitigate against downtime of these platforms, natural disasters, power outages, this and the other. But despite that, Microsoft themselves, as an example, last December experienced 4 major outages, and Google have had similar over the past 12 months. In instances like that, organizations are not able to access their data. And moreover, actually, the end user themselves of these platforms are responsible for the data. So from a data residency standpoint, from a data compliance standpoint, from a data protection standpoint, unfortunately, the buck stops with the organization, institution, or individual that is using the application. And it's just being aware that this is the case that we're trying to build. It's awareness, it's education, because most people jump into the adoption of these platforms, which is no longer an option, as we stated earlier, and through no fault of their own are not aware that actually the same risks, threats, and obligations that once faced them with data that's sat locally in the office is still facing them today in these cloud-based applications. So what are your options? If you click forward one slide, please, Lloyd. You have 3, primarily. You can either do nothing, and a lot of organizations do. About 4 years ago, I'd stand up on stage, still working for Datto, and say 17% of organizations in the UK have no backup whatsoever. Now, thankfully, the incredible work of organizations like Levitt Consultancy and the other partners that Datto works with, as well as obviously the rest of the partners around the world, have done a great job in encouraging people to put backup in place for what once was in the office. But it's another whole ball game when you start looking at cloud-based applications, cloud-based hosted services. You can either work, you can also, work with the limited native recovery features. Yes, Microsoft and Google provide a level of recycling bin capabilities. They allow you to delete something accidentally and give you a small amount of buffer time. But if a student's working on a piece of coursework in September and it needs to be submitted as part of a final submission in July, they deleted it accidentally, call on it in June, and it's not there, that becomes a problem. Same for an organization, tax returns. There are numerous occurrences where you need data at a later date that surpasses local retention. The third option is regaining control, implementing a simple, all-encompassing backup solution that talks directly to either Google Cloud or Microsoft and pulls out data multiple times a day and enables organizations like Levitt Consultancy to, at the point you give them a call, say, give me a second, I've put it back in your inbox. I've put it back in your Google Drive. I've put it back where it was before, because we've got multiple snapshots of exactly what your data set looked like at the point in time that you lost that piece of documentation, you opened that unscrupulous applications. So companies need automated, secure, and simple SaaS backup, and more importantly, they need the expertise of organizations like Levitt Consultancy to manage this for them and ensure that they're not the next inevitable victim of these hideous cybercrime instances or humans being human. So that's all I'm going to cover off this afternoon. I'm going to stick around, so if you've got any questions towards the end, feel free. And thank you once again for taking your time out of your day to listen to me.